Ellie here from the Dark Imp, helping parents reclaim family time by playing board games together. Now recently I did a video about some games that really reduced downtime, the time between turns. So a lot of them had simultaneous action selection or simultaneous play. But sometimes you really want to play a game that does, you do have to wait for your turn. So what can you do as a parent to manage and minimise the downtime that is inherent in a lot of games? Here are some tips. Firstly, incorporate planning time into your turn, into the waits between your turns. So some games, for example, Dominion and Dice City, they allow you to either roll your next dice, which is in Dice City, or draw your next set of cards in Dominion at the end of your turn. So you are able to look at what you've got coming for the next turn, either in the dice or the cards, and start to think about what you're going to do and what decisions you're going to make. Those are really good mechanisms. And you should look for games that let you do that. You can put this into other games. For example, the classic tile laying game Carcassonne starts with you drawing a tile at the beginning of your turn. But it really doesn't matter at all if you just switch that with a house rule and say everyone's going to draw a tile at the end of their turn instead, so that you have some time to think. So you're not sitting there twiddling your thumbs, waiting, and you reduce the thinking time in each player's turn. Very good idea. And it helps to minimise the downtime. Secondly, you could use timers. Now be careful with this, because some people get very stressed if they've got a time limit, but you know your family and you may feel that they will work well if they've got a time limit. Some people can over-analyse and become paralysed by that. We call it analysis paralysis. So setting a gentle time restriction will help those players to make decisions more quickly, or at least it'll train them to make decisions more quickly, and it'll help everybody else not get so fed up during the game. You can differentiate if you want. You can have different timers for different players. Some players may need a bit longer to think than others. There's a great tool which you could look for called the GDT cube, DGT cube. And that allows you to set different timers on different faces of the cube. So you can have different timers for different players and different allowances, and then just turn it over. You turn it on to whichever player's next turn is, and it'll count down. Another thing you can try and do is reduce distractions. Now, I know that phones at the table, smartphones, cause people problems. And there are lots of suggestions in my book, The Board Game Family, about how to prevent phones from taking over at the table. And I'll do another video about that in the future. But if you can just make sure that phones are on silent while you're playing, that will really help people from being distracted. One of the biggest causes of downtime is people getting distracted. You need to be able to think when you're playing a game. You need to be able to really focus on the decisions you've got to make, so that you can continue your turn without holding people up. If you're distracted by notifications all the time, buzzes, dings on the phone, then it's going to split your attention. And even if you don't look at it, you'll be thinking about it. Part of your attention will be taken up by the phone. So try and get everyone to have their phones on silent, better still out of the room. And no one should be allowed to look at their phone during their turn. I mean, it's quite a, it's a habit worth getting into. You could establish a sub-game for people while you're playing. So if you've got many games involve lots of lovely pieces, tiles or meeples, those are the miniature people, or little houses, all sorts of things, wooden components, plastic components, and you can create a sort of sub-game where you're trying to create the best tower of meeples or the best artistic work with the resource cubes you have left. some sort of pixelated picture of the family, for example. So a little extra side game, a side competition that doesn't distract from the main game but keeps everybody occupied when it's not their turn. That might work for you. One of the other things you can do is you can assign roles, game-related roles, to each member of the family or everybody around the table. So for example, if you make sure someone knows they're the banker, or they're the shuffler, or they're the manager of resources, or they're the scorekeeper, then, or maybe they're the person checking that the moves are all valid. So if they have an invested interest, if they have a job, they're going to be focused on that when it's not their turn, making sure everything else is in order, keeping the resources in check, for example. You could also assign other roles to people, game support roles, you might like to call them. Photographer. Who's going to take the photos of this? Who's going to document this brilliant family gaming experience? Who's going to be the reporter to write game night highlights in the family journal? Who's going to be the tabletop hero? Who's going to list the pros and cons of each game so that when you come to get it off the shelf again, you can remind yourself what you liked and what you didn't like. And that person can also list any house rules you come up with. It's a bit like customising your own recipe. You know, what didn't work for you? Oh, I must remember to put these bits in this bag because it was a nightmare to set up. We're going to do that again the same way next time. Just tweaking things a little bit to suit you, your family, and the setup. So that's another possible option, making sure you have game support roles. Another thing you could do is ask players to talk through what they're doing in their turn. It's quite a good habit to get into because it keeps other players drawn in. So you can sort of narrate your thinking. I'm thinking I might do this, but I'm worried about that. I've got a couple of choices and I'm trying to decide which one is the best thing to do. You don't want loads and loads of that because it could become really frustrating, but giving players an insight into what you're thinking will help those players develop their own tactics and strategy, and will also help keep players interested in what's happening. Take this a little bit further and make it into a story. So these aren't just little wooden pieces, these are characters. Who are they and why are they going into this farm at this particular moment? What is it they're doing? What's the motivation behind it? You can add storytelling elements which will stay with you and you'll remember from one game to the next. And finally, if all else fails, just choose some simultaneous action games. If you really can't cope with downtime, go back to that video. I'll put a link in the notes underneath. Go back to that other video and check out some simultaneous action games where there is no downtime.